Hi guys, welcome back. It's a lovely cool morning out here and I have a little friend with me. So I put a short out probably a week or two ago with another one of these on it, and I was asking people what kind of winter they predicted based on it, and I got a few different answers from people, but I got one comment I honestly can't even remember right this second what it was on. I think it was on TikTok because I put it on there too, asking like how you could tell, and then I realized that I guess not everybody knows about these little guys, so I thought I would just make a short little video talking about them. So these are the caterpillar of the Isabella Tiger Moth. And they are most commonly called either woolly bears or woolly worms. Here come my crazy dogs. Down! I'm so excited, I know. They are most commonly either called woolly bears or woolly worms. I grew up calling them woolly bears. I grew up in western New York State, and when I moved here to Kentucky, everybody here calls them woolly worms. Down. Anyway, I wanted to find out what was more common, so I put a poll up last night on, I put it on here and on Insta and on TikTok, and it was pretty late when I put it up last night, so I haven't gotten a ton of responses, but as of the making of this video, more people said woolly worm, so I guess woolly worm probably wins, but I'm gonna keep calling them woolly bears anyway. So anyway, regarding weather prediction, these are pretty widespread. They are in many parts of North America, so parts of Canada, United States, and Mexico. Very common, and it is common folklore here that you can predict the coming winter's weather based on their coloration. And there's a few different versions of that. So what I grew up with was kind of the most simplistic version of it, which just says that as you can see, they've got, I hope it's going to show up on the video, but they're banded. They have a black area on the front and on their back, and then the middle band is a like rusty orangey brown color. So the most kind of simplistic version of the weather prediction folklore is just basically the ratio of the black to brown, that if there are more black bands than brown, that it will be a harsher winter, and if there's more brown than black, that it will be a more mild winter. So that's kind of the simplest version that I grew up with, but there's a couple other versions I have heard that are a little bit more detailed, I guess you would say. So they have 13 individual bands, and that's probably not going to be super easy to see on camera, but you know, if you picture a caterpillar, they have those little bands, and these guys have them too. It's just a little bit harder to see because they're so fuzzy. But they have 13 bands, and so there are versions that those individual bands correspond to either the 13 weeks in winter, or I have also heard that they correspond to the whole year, basically, with one band for each month. I know there are technically 12 months, but if you look at a month as more of a 4-week lunar cycle rather than a calendar month, then there are 13 of those. So in those versions, like with the weeks of winter version, each band would kind of represent 1 week of winter. So in that version, starting at the head, each band would tell you relatively how that week of winter would be. So if you have more dark bands at the front, the beginning of winter would be harsher than average. And if you have a longer brown band, then then if you have a longer brown band, you would have kind of a mild stretch in the middle of winter, and then the tail end would kind of tell you obviously how the end of winter would go as you're leading up to spring. Now that version I find kind of interesting because this guy is actually different from the first two I found this year. The first two I found this year, and it happens sometimes that within that black area, sometimes there'll be like an orange band in the middle of that, which I find kind of intriguing with those particular versions of it, because that would be like there's the harsher beginning of winter, but there is going to be a milder week in the middle of that. So then there's that, and the version where it corresponds to the whole year, that would be more like the beginning of the year, as in like springtime would be represented by the head area, and then so the relation of that to the body would kind of tell you how, if you're going to have like a late spring or an early spring. So like on this one, the black band at the head is longer than the one at the tail, so that would mean theoretically that you're going to kind of have a later spring, and maybe winter would go on a little bit longer, but then because of the short end, that maybe you would have a milder fall based on that, and a pretty long summer. So with this guy in particular, just looking at him, so with the original simple version that I grew up with, where it's just the number of black bands versus brown bands that tell you, I would say based on this guy, you would be, I think there's a little bit more brown than black, so I would say that he would be predicting a slightly milder than average winter for us. And then, you know, with the other versions, like I said, he has a little bit more black at the front than at the back, so that would mean either that we were going to have a kind of rougher start to winter, but that the end of winter just towards spring would be a little bit milder than average, or like I just said, that if you're going with the whole year version, that we would actually have a harder spring than normal and a milder fall. So I think it's a fun thing to look for. I think most of us who grew up with this just like to look for them, whether we put a lot of stock in it or not. And as I said, I've already found two this year that looked a little bit different from this one, so I don't put a ton of stock in it, but I do think it's kind of a fun folklore and little tradition to look for them and just see what they say. So anyway, if you grew up looking at these, if you're familiar with it, if you want to tell me in the comments what your kind of the version you grew up with and what you see on this little guy, that would be cool. Or if you didn't, if you weren't familiar with these before, definitely interested to see you know, where people live and kind of the name they're familiar with and the version of the folklore they're familiar with, or if they aren't in your area, if you're in North America and you live somewhere where these guys don't live. But anyway, thank you for hanging out with me for a few minutes this morning, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.